Good morning. November 18th, 2019. For our people, we're here at Hakim's Bookstore, 210 South 52nd Street, in between Walnut and Locust, or basically, more specifically, in between Walnut and Chancellor. Park on Chancellor. We got the free parking right there. We want you to spend your money in the bookstore and not give it up to the city because they don't know what to do with it. But no, 52nd and Walnut, 52nd and Chancellor, 210 South 52nd Street, Hakim's Bookstore and Gift Shop. We're getting ready for Thanksgiving, getting ready for Kwanzaa. And we're here doing For Our People, right? A video show, a podcast, if you will, basically honoring the memory of Lister Velt Middleton, right? Who created the original For the People. If you're old as me, and I'm a little old, you remember this show. This is the first place on his show was the first place that I saw John Henry Clark. It was the first time I saw Ivan Van Sertima, right? This was the first time I saw Sheikh Anta Diop. I saw their books, but to know who they were in person and have them break their stuff down was on Lister Velt Middleton's show For the People. So we're here honoring that memory, doing For Our People, and I am your scholar in residence, Andre Smith, SmittyBanton. I'm here to bring a lot of the great scholars and the great scholarship, the books, the writings that I've encountered in 15 years of teaching law schools. I taught at Penn State. I taught at Florida National University, at Widener University, at Howard Law School. Shout out to all my colleagues. Shout out to all my former students. So we're taking and I met a lot of fantastic people. I've met the 21st century Diops and Van Sertimas and John Henry Clarks. They are out there, right? And so it's my job to go and bring those people and bring those books and bring that intelligence and bring it to you guys and get you excited about coming down to Hakim's Bookstore, 52nd and Walnut and Locust, and buying black books and cherishing and restoring and preserving our history. Again, we're on Facebook right now, but we know that Facebook is owned by Mark Zuckerberg. It is a private company. It is not beholden to the First Amendment or the Constitution, so it can censor speech as much as it wants to. And so to have Amazon as well, all these private enterprises, we cannot count and rely on them to preserve our history. We're going to have to be the ones that get the physical copies. I'm down with the ebooks. That's all great. But we need to get these physical copies and build up our libraries, right? Build up our libraries in our homes and make sure we have books on the shelf, books on the counter, books on the steps, books on wherever, so your kids can touch them. And let me make very clear, in this environment today online, they have to get these books because there is so much misinformation going on out there. There's so many lies and deceit going on social media, and they're going to spin it like it is true. It's funny to me, the sources today from CNN and whatnot and The Economist and all these videos being presented as sources. Read the books, right? Any subject matter, read more than one. Right, get competing perspectives. A video on YouTube can lead you and pique your interest. I'm all for that. But satisfy that thirst for the knowledge by coming down to Hakim's Bookstore, 210 South 52nd Street, and copping the book. Go to, we're online, right? HakimsBookstore.com. Right, HakimsBookstore.com. If you can't make it to West Philly, if you're in DC, if you're anywhere out in the country, you can still stop by HakimsBookstore.com, order the book there. As you see, we're Facebook Live, right? So 11 a.m. on Mondays, we are Facebook Live. If you're at the job, get paid to watch us. Right? Put on your headphones and check us out. We're also on Hakim's Bookstore on Instagram. Again, I'm your scholar in residence, Andre Smith. I got the super producer, Chris Arnold. Maybe later we see the Queen Mother, Princess Y. Thank you, brother. Princess Y come through, Yvonne Blake, our queen mother, the matriarch of the store, right, who's taken the legacy on from her dad, Dawood Hakim, who created this bookstore, this institution in West Philly way back in 1959. So we can all do the math. We're talking 60 years in the game. Right, 60 years in the game, and we're going to do another 60 and another 60 and another 60 after that. Again, we're here in beautiful West Philadelphia. With today's topic, right? We're going to do a few things. We're going to do some recaps. We're going to do some shout-outs, but let you know today's topic, what we're going to discuss mainly today, is Byron Allen's lawsuit versus Comcast. It's actually precisely named Comcast versus NOAAMA. We'll talk about what those initials or that acronym stands for. But for right now, we'll just call it Byron Allen versus Comcast. A lot of you have heard about this case. You've seen it on Facebook, or at least blurbs. You've seen articles in newspapers. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund, Cheryl Ifill, the Attorney General for Black America. I see you, Cheryl. She's put out a little something, but I know some of you have feel like it's not enough, that it hasn't been publicized enough, that it hasn't been talked about enough, that if our civil rights laws are going to be retrenched, how come there isn't more protest? How come there isn't more activism related to this? And we're going to talk about all that. But I really want to put it in context for all those that are unfamiliar with the case, because I'm talking like everybody knows what it is. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with the case, know that Byron Allen, the comedian that we've all known for 10, 20, 30 years, still has a show that you can probably see on cable TV, has his own cable network. He's also a business owner on top of a performer. He owns several several cable channels, and he's trying to get wide distribution for them, right? He's a hustler, right? If you can hear the beats in the background, everything's used in fair use. The books, the music, we're just trying to do some commentary and some newsworthiness, right? So, Byron Allen owns a lot of stations. He's trying to get them distributed widely. But we know that within the media, there's not many outlets for black entrepreneurs, black stations, and whatnot. We know that even black entertainment television has been sold by Bob Johnson to a majority ownership or corporate ownership. So he can't get his shows more widely distributed. And here's the point. This is why it's Comcast versus NOAAM, is because all of the other black media companies pretty much have joined him in this fight, because they are not being carried across the countries as white citizens are. And that's a very important term that we're going to talk about, as white citizens, because the law actually states that we have the freedom or the right to contract, quote unquote, as white citizens. I'm going to make a huge deal about that a little bit later. Thank you, everybody that's joining us. Feel free, if you got questions or concerns or comments, you want to flash them, I'll try to get you in and shout you out, and also answer your questions if you have some. But again, with this Byron Allen case, I also want to put it in context. I've heard some people talk about how this case will, if it doesn't go the right way, will roll back all of our civil rights, and that's not true, right? So I want to put this case in the proper context. I want you to be able to talk intelligently with whomever, school them if you have to, after watching a little bit of this video. Again, and back it up with written sources, back it up with the actual case briefs online. If you email us, I'll tell you where to find them, right? Again, I'm your scholar in residence. It's my job to bring the law. It's my job to bring academia and whatnot to the people. So Instagram, send us emails, send us messages on Hakim's Bookstore on Facebook. Let me know what you want to know, all right? Peace and power, Nefertiti Moore. That's what's up. Glad you're joining us. So, I want to give you the scope of this. On the one hand, it's not a retrenchment of all of our civil rights, but I do want to make a point about something that happened this week. It is very similar, not the same, but very similar to the Colin Kaepernick situation. Again, how Colin Kaepernick is in a beef with the NFL about being excluded from their league. Now, he is talking about employment. Byron Allen is talking about as a contractor. They're two different scenarios. So Colin Kaepernick is dealing with a collective bargaining agreement. He also, as you would be doing if you were discriminated against in your employment, you would be going to Title VII or Section 1983 of the Civil Rights Code. Byron Allen is dealing with Section 1981 of the Civil Rights Act, and it is dealing with that right to contract. So this is the civil rights law you would use if you're discriminated against by your landlord. Right? This is not just about black billionaires. If you were trying to buy your way into an exclusive neighborhood or a white neighborhood, and you felt that you weren't sold a house because of your race, this is the statute that we're talking about. Not whether you've been discriminated by your job or whether you've been discriminated by the government, but whether a private entity, a private enterprise, a private business has discriminated against you or not allowed you to contract with you. We're here in Philadelphia. If you think about a year ago, I think it's about a year ago, you remember the big controversy about the brothers that were thrown out of Starbucks. Right? Again, they're not there as employees. They're not there in an educational program. They're in there to contract, to be a consumer or customer. So and they would sue under this law if they were discriminated against by race as far as their ability to contract with a business. So that's the scope of this. So if we have a bad or good decision on this case, it affects that context. It does not affect the context of employment discrimination, and we'll go into in more detail about employment discrimination needing motivating factors to prove that discrimination. And that's going to also be the issue here, whether Section 1981 will mirror Section 1983 and require just motivating factors to prove your case, or do you need to prove precisely that you were 100% the best candidate and the only reason you didn't get it was because you were black? Again, go to our Facebook page. If you're not there now reading, listening to us on Facebook Live, please like the page, share the video. We're going to post it here on Facebook Live. I'm also going to post it on my YouTube pages, Afro-Atlantic and Jurisprudence. Spread it widely. Tune in with us every Monday. Next Monday, I think we're going to talk about JayZ, right? Colin Kaepernick. But I'm going to talk about it in the context of 9th century hip-hop and MCs. I'm gonna save that for later. I hope I got your appetite wet talking about 9th century hip hop and diss track and MCs. 9th century, right? The year 900. All right. But again, going back to this issue today, Byron Allen, Comcast. Again, we're talking about black people in white spaces, renters, home buyers, contractors. What does it mean? What do you have to prove to show that you were discriminated against based on your race? Okay, once again, we're down here at Hakim's Bookstore, West Philly, 210 South 52nd Street, between Walnut and Locust. It's the Christmas season. Right now, we're open on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturdays. We're going to expand to 6 days a week in the month of December. Come down and get your Kwanzaa gifts and all your winter solstice stuff. I know I do. Right? As a matter of fact, you can see a blanket in the back. I got my grandmother who's 103. I got her that blanket last year, and I got a couple of the dolls here for my mother. All right. So let's continue. Let's talk about, before we get into the meat of the subject, I just want to remind you again about what this show is all about. It's for our people. This is actually, if you've tuned in this for the first time, we've done several episodes before, right? We're building up, we're getting more sophisticated, more suave, and the production and all that good stuff, getting more regularity. So you hope you keep joining us every Monday at 11 o'clock. In the past, last week, we did our episode on should NCAA players get paid. It is my belief, strong belief. I've written a book called Outlaw Amateurism. You can read that. You can get that on Amazon. That NCAA players should get paid. Not just NCAA players, but all youth athletes that produce a certain amount of revenue. They should be protected. They should be unionized, just like the Screen Actors Guild does for a 12-year-old actor. You don't hire a 12-year-old actor for free for $1 million movie. Or how about the American Society of Composers and Publishers, so-called ASCAP? A 12-year-old that makes a record and that makes $1 million, they should be getting paid. That should be no different for black athletes under the age of 18 that are making huge amounts of money, not just for the NCAA. Some of you may have seen the junior NBA on cable television. 13-year-olds getting broadcast internationally, and the NBA making millions of dollars. This is a factor within the racial wealth gap because we are disproportionately represented within these unpaid athletes. Okay? Again, come down to Hakim's Bookstore. Oh, we got our calendars in, right? The Christmas calendars, the Kwanzaa calendars 2020. Big year 2020, right? This show, I'm writing another book, Afro-Atlantic and Jurisprudence. It should be out in 2020. Big things are going on 2020. Come get your calendars down here at Hakim's Bookstore for yourself, for black bookstores. We talked about should NCAA players get paid. We featured some of the great sports books we have around here in the store. The week before that, we talked about how we fight white supremacy, a great book by Akiba Solomon and Kenya Rankin. We talked about the myth of black inferiority the week before that. Great book called Brainwashed we have on the shelves. Tom Burrow. Please go to the website, come in the store, pick it up. And again, next week we'll talk about JayZ, HipHop, and 9th Century Emcees and diss tracks. As a matter of fact, we got Empire State of Mind right here. So we'll talk about this controversy of JayZ, Colin Kaepernick, Byron Allen. It's all related, right? As a matter of fact, when we talk about Byron Allen a little bit later and JayZ, should we have sympathy for black billionaires, for black millionaires? Do they deserve our activism? There's some of you who may not really care one way or the other about Byron Allen or Colin Kaepernick because they're athletes or they're millionaires or they're billionaires. And some of you may be fighting for a socialist system or communist system where you believe having those amounts of insane wealth is improper regardless of whether black people have it or white people have it. So we may talk about that a little later today, but definitely even more so next week when we talk about JayZ. We can talk about the worth of black billionaires, the worth of hip-hop, Dr. Dre, others that have made billions of dollars in the genre. Before we even go a little further, again, I want to give a shout out to Princess Y, Yvonne Blake, again, Chris Arnold. I want to shout out Joel Wilson. Where are my Terps that are watching? You know Joel from way back in the day. All my Central folks, you know Joel, and the I Buy Black program here in Philadelphia, giving you discounts for purchasing items at black-owned businesses around the city. He also is a member or founder of TechCore, doing STEM and internships with the kids, doing great things. Joel, keep it up. Shout out to 100 Black Men, all the people in the city that are actually concerned about police brutality. I know Colin Kaepernick is. All the people that are on Facebook and social media supporting Colin Kaepernick, it's great that if he gets a job again. But remember that the point of his protest to begin with was about police brutality, was about the conditions black people are living in this country. So shout out to the people who aren't on Facebook because they're actually in the streets doing work, right? Because they're actually doing the community activism. So shout out to 100 Black Men and all the people that are out there doing it. The Power Up program. Wonderful people that we've seen this past weekend in the Power Up program. I want to give you a shout out. Let me give a shout out to Dr. Alicia Bullock and Philly.com and radio. As a matter of fact, let me give a shout out to one of my good friends, Khalid Alim, the real estate bull, right? Here ain't nobody gonna work harder for your real estate needs than my man Khalid right here. So we're all trying to do our thing here at Hakim's Bookstore, supporting black businesses, supporting black education, supporting social capital, trying to build ourselves up. Let me give another shout out to all the black bookstores in the city and around the country. Amalgam, Uncle Bobby's, Black and Noble, wherever you are, spreading the knowledge, making sure that we're all fulfilling our brains with that good food, with that good mental food, right? Because you hear that Donny Hathaway in the background, right? Someday we all gonna be free, right? If we make it happen. This is all about how we, black nationalism for the person who's still engaged with this system. For all of you that have withdrawn, again, I support MOVE. I support the Nation of Islam. I support all those that have repatriated back to Africa. But for those of us that still have our children in the school system, for all of us who still are working hard, are still buying real estate, or still buying property, still engaged with this United States of America, this is the black nationalism that we're talking about. This is the strategizing that we're talking about. We're talking about better educating ourselves. We're talking about starting and supporting black businesses and enterprises. And we're talking about attacking that myth of black inferiority by showing you the good in all that we do and stop criticizing each other over the minutiae, especially since we know other folks will do all that criticizing for us. It ain't going to be missed. Again, email us your black businesses. Hit us up on Facebook, like the page, send us your email addresses. Tell us where your business is at. Let me give you a shout out, right? Let's promote each other. Right? Let us promote each other. Duran White, Modern Home Solutions, a wonderful brother who's got contractors under him. Right? If you buy a rental property from my man Khalid, you got to fix it up with my man Duran, and then everybody, all three of y'all gonna make a ton of money, right? And bring it on home for our people, right? Donny Hathaway, y'all. You got to take a pause for Donny. Let's talk about some of the books we have on the store on this topic. We're talking about Byron Allen. We're talking about a brother who's a billionaire, right? Who has several network stations and trying to get even wider distribution, right? Wider national distribution. We'll talk about some billionaires out in the world that's trying to get international distribution. Think big, y'all. Think big. As a matter of fact, books in the bookstore we got, Think and Grow Rich. You know Think and Grow Rich, right? Been in Dennis Kimbro, Napoleon Hill. Let's think about the first billionaire. Well, he's not the first billionaire, but he's the first black dude, first brother to create a $1 billion company. Who remembers Reginald Lewis? Right? Reginald Lewis, come to the website, order Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? And it's interesting, he said, why should white guys have all the fun? The statute we're going to talk about specifically says that everyone has the right to contract as white citizens. So if you're looking for proof of white supremacy in our law, it's there. So Reginald Lewis, Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? Grab that book. He's also, although I'm a son of blood and thunder, and so is my man right here, right? We let's shout out Colin Kaepernick and Reginald Lewis, members of Kappa Alpha Psi, trying to do their thing. In the bookstore, I believe we have The Black Rose, right? That's the Madam C.J. Walker story, right? Madam C.J. Walker. That book was actually started by Alex Haley, and then as he died, it was finished by Tananarive Dway. And we have some of her books, First Blood. Some of you remember, may know her. The book Black Fortunes, right, by Shamari Willis, about black millionaires and business owners in the 19th century. Right? So black folks getting it in the commercial marketplace. This is not a post-civil rights era thing. right? We've been doing this so long as we've been in this country. I don't want to go off topic, but we can go to black business owners as free blacks and even some of the enslaved black folks that were allowed to sell their goods on Sundays, and that's how you quote unquote buy your freedom. Okay, again, we're going too far down the road. Let me pull it back, because we're here to talk about Byron Allen. But let's also talk about some of the other books we have. I think a new one came in that I've been particularly interested in, Jessica Nunhard's Collectivist Economics, right? Again, if we're going to talk about making money on the one hand, Collective Courage. If we're talking about black billionaires on the one hand, right? But then we're also talking about this collective struggle on the other, right? Because there are the socialist, the communist criticism of capitalism. Sure, it's true, right? They make the right points, but how do we fit it in between? Because capital is absolutely necessary, and not just a capitalist society, but also a socialist and communist society. Capital just doesn't disappear. The question becomes who is in control of it, whether it's the people and whether it's the state, right? And so even if the state were in control of it, are we in control of the state? Right? So when it comes to that accumulating capital in a collective way, in a way that honors our ancestors, in a way that promotes black power, black nationalism, black energy, black capacity, black potential, however you want to frame it, how do we do that more specifically? Right? Great book by Jessica Gordon Nembhard. I have not read it. It's in the plastic because this is mine. This is my copy. Right, I'm going to be killing this, and hopefully we'll do a lecture on this pretty soon. We got other books. You hear that Nas in the background? I can be anything I want to be. Working While Black, right? We got the 48 Laws of Power, right? We got Mind Over Money, right? Don't worry, make money. Right now, don't worry, be happy. Don't worry, make money. All right, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So again, I love my community activists. I love my scholars. I'm rooting for everybody black. So again, if your thing is nonprofits, wonderful. If your thing is academia, wonderful. I hope you get tenure and I hope you get to the top 10 universities. But if your thing is creating your own business, yes, I'm rooting for you to get into the top, the Fortune 500. Absolutely. Again, but there are books that criticize this. I have no problem. Let's promote the Keeanga Taylor, right? We have Keeanga Taylor, who is in the Black Liberation Movement, in the Black Lives Matter movement. She's written a book called Race for Profit, and how white folks make money in gentrification and whatnot, and how white banks make money off of racism. Mercer Baradaran, The Color of Money, right, about the limitations of black banking. Hopefully we do a whole episode on black banking and what have you. It's a great thing. We need to recycle our dollars, but there is no silver bullet, right? There is no one thing that we can do that solves all the problems. So everybody can get in where they fit in. As much as we may criticize capitalism, as maybe we criticize wealth, I know there's a big thing going on about billionaires being immoral and whatnot, and that may or may not be true. But let's put this in context, because we do know that the richest man in the history of the world was Mansa Musa, an African, a black man. Right? And you can learn about that also in the World's Great Men of Color and all the books that we have here. Right? We have Civilizational Barbarism by Sheikh Anta Diop, where he argues the beginnings of capitalism were in ancient Egypt, right? Where ancient Egyptians not only created law, they created contracting, they created leases, they created private property, and we know from all of that gold and all the cemeteries that and not only that, Nubia as well, the gold and all the goods in those cemeteries, they did in fact deal with personal wealth. So the idea that all of Africa was socialist, was everyone had the same, basically tribal, that's not the case. We had Civilization was not brought to us. Capitalism was not brought to us. Race was not brought to us. Commerce and finance were not brought to us, right? And so I reject arguments to the contrary, right? Yes, yes, we created institutions designed to share the wealth, right? More than other peoples. So we want to join our enterprising with our collectivism. How do we put it all together, right? How do we not honor, but how do we reflect on the past and create that power that we used to have, but also in a way that treats each other better than this society treats us and encourages us to teach each other. So again, collective courage, Jessica Numhart. I'm so very interested in reading this book and reporting it back to you. But there's been some scholars that have already gone down this path. You guys know about Claude Anderson, right? Powernomics, right? Black labor, white wealth, right? So we've had brothers and sisters that have been seriously engaged in this idea of economic justice, and you know that's my thing. I want to do this really quick. I know we want to get to the Byron Allen case, and trust me, we're going to knock that down, but I also want to introduce another little weekly segment that we're doing. Again, my job as I see it, right, is to carry on the legacy of Listervelt Middleton, right, for the people. And so that's why we're doing For Our People. And one of the great things he did was bring folks out of the ivory tower. He brought scholars that have been written books for academics and brought them to the general public. So I just want to mention some of the very good books that have come out just in the last month by black scholars that may interest you. Hit us up on the bookstore. Hit us up Hakim's Bookstore if you need me to repeat or you need us to help you find some of these books I'm about to mention. Black Metaphors, How Modern Racism Emerged from Medieval Race Thinking by Cord Whitaker. I mentioned this book because, number one, this is out of University of Pennsylvania Press. This is a University of Pennsylvania scholar. For all my West Philly folks, we're going to honor Drexel University and UPenn down here. Hopefully you get some of you scholars to come in. The Black Law Students Association, the BSU, come through Hakim's Bookstore. Let's chop it up. Another reason I want to bring that up is because we also have Stamped from the Beginning, Ibram Kendi, right? And so this is a great follow-up from that book. If you read Ibram Kendi's Stamped from the Beginning, where he talks about how racial thinking emerged in the Americas, this is, I guess, a predecessor of how it started bubbling up in Europe before it came to America. I still must insist that Al-Jahiz and Africans had an understanding of race, blackness and whiteness, as against Egyptians and Syrians and Ethiopians and Azanj before Europeans. So I chafe at the argument that Europeans created race. We did have an understanding of it before they made their advances in naval technology, guns, and electricity. That's why they're where they are right now. The Creative Underclass, Youth, Race, and the Gentrifying City by Tyler Denmead, Duke University Press. Black Software, The Internet and Racial Justice, From the AfroNet to Black Lives Matter by Charlton McElwain, Oxford University Press, a very hype press. Diversifying STEM, Multidisciplinary Perspectives on Race and Gender, edited by Ebony O. McGee. Again, shout out to Joel Wilson and his tech corps that's trying to diversify STEM here in the city of Philadelphia, trying to get our kids involved in an industry that is as lucrative, I'm sorry, not as lucrative, more lucrative than sports. STEM is producing more millionaires and more billionaires than athletics. Know this, right? When we get further and further into the future, artificial intelligence is taking over jobs. We are losing jobs. When you get driverless trucks, that's 1 million truck drivers out of work. Right? We have to prepare for this future. We can lament it. We can beat our chest. We can yell at the sky, but we have to prepare our children from it. STEM education. Please Invest in your kids. And there's also several books about interesting persons that I definitely want to read. All Blood Runs Red, The Legendary Life of Eugene Bullitt Boxer, Pilot, Soldier, Spy. Forward from the Sea, The Journey of a Black Woman Oceanographer and Engineer. Oscar Charleston, The Life and Legend of Baseball's Greatest Forgotten Player. Roaring Back, The Fall and Rise of Our Cablinasian Friend Tiger Woods. So some great books by some tenured and junior scholars that are out there doing really great work in halls of academia. And again, we got to bring them out of the White Tower into the streets, into the community, because I know you folks, Jean Tremaris, thank you for joining us. I know you're interested in deep stuff like that. I know when you're online and you're on Facebook and Twitter, some of that stuff is just not deep enough for you. Some of that stuff is just too superficial. Right? That you need to know where the books that can really feed your soul, right? Once again, we are at Hakim's Bookstore, 210 South 52nd Street. Brothers are going to work it out. We got the Willie Hutch in the background, right? 52nd and Walnut and Locust. Get that free parking on Chancellor. We are the home of black books. Oldest black bookstore on the East Coast since 1959. You ready? Ready to talk about this Byron Allen case? All right, let's talk about it. So first of all, let's talk about, again, it's similar but not the same as a Colin Kaepernick. I just want to use his situation right now, just put it all in a frame of reference. Colin Kaepernick, or someone that's trying to get hired by an employer, is going to sue when they're discriminated against. They're going to sue under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. That is the 1960s. This statute was created in the 1860s. It is 100 years older. It is pretty much the oldest civil rights law on the books. It was specifically created after the Civil War and after the 13th Amendment was ratified. It was vetoed by President Andrew Johnson, just like he vetoed 40 acres and a mule. Fortunately, the law, his veto was overridden with respect to this civil rights law of 1866. And it gives all citizens of the country the right to contract, the rights and the protection of white citizens. It says that specifically. Let me give you a little more context. There's a book called Power and Light, the Mifflin Gibbs story. Mifflin Wister Gibbs, who was also a Philadelphia member of the AME Church, and he went to California during the California Gold Rush. This is before the Civil War, right? The West is supposed to be free. It's supposed to be free of slavery, especially California, nice liberal Ninth Circuit California. Well, not at that time. As soon as people started making money, white folks in California passed laws that strip all black folks of their rights to contract, to rights to testify in court, etc. And therefore, they couldn't make any money off the gold rush. So that's an economic boom that whites got to participate in. The wealth carries on forward for hundreds of years, and we were excluded from that, right? That is the horror that we're talking, not just from slavery, but also free blacks had to endure prior to the Civil War. And so the Civil Rights Act of 1866 addresses that, gives everyone the right to contract, quote unquote, as white citizens. What happened to Mifflin Wister Gibbs? He led 700 black miners to Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and basically established colonies there. Why is Jadakiss and Anthony Hamilton, why is this not played like every day? So here we're talking about, instead of Colin Kaepernick seeking employment with the NFL, we're talking about Byron Allen trying to contract with Comcast and DirecTV or any other cable and outlets out there. It's as if, again, you could, on the one hand, you can sell your labor to the NFL, but you could also be a contractor with the NFL. The NFL spends billions of dollars on vending services, on buttons, on jackets, on slippers. What if you were to create a product and you wanted the NFL to sponsor it, and you think it's the best product out there, and you think the only reason they didn't sign a contract with you is because you're black, or because they just don't particularly care for black people. The Queen Mother is in the house. We got Princess Y in the building while we're here talking about NAAM versus Comcast. So again, as a consumer, if you were to go, there's when we talk about buy the block, there's a controversy. Some of us say buy the block, right? Buy houses in black neighborhoods. Some people say, well, buy houses in white neighborhoods. If we're going to close the racial wealth gap, we need to infiltrate those neighborhoods and also get the appreciation that they get, because those houses appreciate faster than houses in our neighborhoods. Okay, I'm a buy the block type of person, but one of my good friends and colleagues in the legal academy, Dorothy Brown, promotes the other side, promotes the integration side. But for people that follow her, what happens when you get to that condominium? What happens when you get to that gated community and you're rejected by the homeowners association, and you know that you got a great job, you know you got plenty of money, you know you maintain a great house, and you know you feel as though the only reason you were rejected was because you're black? Well, this case is very similar. Even just because it's dealing with billionaires, again, it's dealing with anyone that wants to contract generally in the society. And the question that we're dealing with here is proof. That's the big thing. We're not talking about rolling it back. Whatever happens in this case, that statute is going to remain, right? It will still be there to sue under. What the Supreme Court is dealing with right now is, what proof do you need to win? Actually, to be more precise, they're dealing with what proof you need to even keep your case in court first. Then secondly, what proof you need to win. There's actually two issues in this case, so I want you guys to understand. First of all, what do you need to prove to get yourself in court, to get yourself to what we call discovery? Right? I'm going to explain discovery in a little more detail because it's hugely important when you're in a lawsuit, right? Discovery is how you're going to get the proof that other people are discriminated against you, or the proof that someone else conspired against you. But then also, how much of that proof is necessary? The main issue here, the one that most people are concerned about, is whether or not the standard for Section 1981 for this Civil Rights Act between business owners is called but-for causation or motivating factors. So what does that mean? In the Civil Rights Act of 1965, the Title VII, where you sue for employment, when you sue because you've been excluded from an educational institution or a federally sponsored program, all you have to prove is, and I'm not saying all as if it's easy, but what you have to prove is that race was a motivating factor in the decision that excluded you, right? Prove that the decision makers had race on their minds and you prevail, right? Because we don't like that in this country, or at least Congress said that they didn't like that in the 1960s. That is, contrast that with but-for causation, which is what people are trying to attach to this Civil Rights Act of 1981 and making it harder to sue under it. They want to say that you only win if you prove that besides race, you were 100% clearly the best candidate. That's a higher hurdle, right? That's a higher hurdle to leap. On the one hand, proving that race was a factor versus proving race was the factor. It was the sole reason why you didn't get the contract, why you didn't get the house, why you didn't get whatever you were seeking, right? Was race a motivating factor, or can you prove that race was the only factor, that but for race, you would have gotten it? Okay, let me pull back and talk about the facts of the case before we talk about how it's going to be resolved. Byron Allen is not just suing on his own behalf. Again, it's Comcast versus the National Association of African American Media Companies, right? So for all of these media companies, they all recognize that there is that black businesses get such a small percentage of the pie, that they're excluded everywhere. This isn't just about Comcast. Byron Allen offered his his channels, his news channel, his car channel, weather channel, pets channel, all these different channels. He owns a conglomerate of channels. He's offered them to DirecTV. He's offered them to many different outlets and been rejected, even though they are quality offerings. Their argument is that they're redundant with some of their other channels. Their argument is that he has weather.com, but they also have the Weather Channel, right? That he has travel.com, but they already have travelguide.com. Now his response to that is, you have duplicates of plenty other channels. You have duplicate news channels. You have duplicate movie channels. And once again, how is it that just seems to always be the case with all of the distributors? And here's the problem. This is a major, major problem before we even get to this case. You cannot win in court simply by saying there are 13% black people in the country, and yet only 1% of all the media money goes to black people. So-called statistical discrimination. You can prove it. The court will see that this is the case, that let's say $13 billion is spent on media channels, and yet black people only get 100 million. Obviously racism is about, but the Supreme Court will not allow you to win a lawsuit unless you do what? That you have a specific victim and a specific perpetrator. Again, this is why they're not giving you reparations, or at least, I'm sorry, this is the excuse they're using not to give you reparations, that you must find a specific perpetrator and a specific victim, and that's how our court systems work. Sounds good, but it's not necessarily true, because we just mentioned that Title VII, Congress specifically in the statute says that if race is a motivating factor in the decision, then they should be penalized. This is what we're doing. We're talking about a difference between two different concepts. On the one hand, the conservatives on the court want to restrict the law from redressing it unless you specifically can prove that you were harmed and hurt. Whereas the civil rights laws of 1965, this idea of motivating factors, can we broaden the law to enforcing or promoting having the purpose of creating a post-racial society? I don't believe we're in a post-racial society, but how do we get there unless the law pushes us there, right? Brown versus Board of Education. Some years ago, I hope some of you may have known the name Derek Bell. Please get the book Faces at the Bottom of the Well. He's probably, along with Kimberly Crenshaw, he's probably the most famous black law professor in history of the United States. He wrote a book called Faces at the Bottom of the Well. He's the author of Racial Realism. He's also author of the Interest Convergence Theory. He's the baddest law professor there's been. He argued that Brown versus Board of Education was a failure. I had the privilege, I had the honor of actually being in a discussion with Professor Bell over this. I agreed with him that integration through Brown versus Board of Education has not occurred. But I disagree with Professor Bell in that the one thing that you can grant the Supreme Court through Brown versus Board of Education is that they made racism, or made being a racist, taboo. That prior to then, it was not a bad thing, but after Brown versus Board of Education, we at least had the veneer. We at least had the illusion of inclusion, as Paul Mooney discussed it, that we are trying to be a post-racial society, right? And we can criticize the court. Ever since then, they've left that on the books. They said, we're trying to be post-racial. We're trying to sanction overt calls to white supremacy, but then every case thereafter has made it hard to actually penalize those folks. So it keeps the law on the books so that people all around the world, in Africa, in Europe, in Asia, because again, that's what Derek Bell says. In the 1950s, it was capitalism versus communism, and Russia was using race and how black people were treated in America as propaganda to win the rest of the world, and that's why Brown versus Board of Education came about. And ever since then, they've been pulling back on it because they didn't really mean it. They just wanted the rest of the world to see it. So here we have the Supreme Court faced with that decision again. Do they maintain at least the veneer? That's all we're even asking. We're not asking them to sanction statistical discrimination. We're asking them at this point to just keep the veneer, the illusion of inclusion, the idea that if a company uses race as a motivating factor in their decision, then they have basically violated Congress's rule against using race in commerce, against treating other people as quote unquote white citizens, as Section 1981 requires, right? Let me show you specifically how that can happen. Let's say, again, you were making a decision. You were going to hire a contractor. You had 10 different bids, and you created a grid. Well, this is for education. This is for experience, right? This is because you listen to Sizzler Kalonji, right? Fire. And let's say one of the factors was, again, 2 points for being Asian, 1 point for being black, 3 points for being white. That's a factor. That's a motivating factor. You win in Title VII. But under this law, the way Comcast wants it, the way the majority of circuit courts around the country, and know that the majority of circuit courts around the country have already ruled this way, they say you still don't win. You still don't win, even if you prove that race was part of this grid and you get points for being white versus being black. That you still have to prove that you were the number one bidder, and without any question, you were going to bid, you were going to win. And guess what that means? Not only can I use a grid, I can use pretext if I want to discriminate against you. I can say, well, race was a factor, but I didn't like their shoes. I didn't like that they liked reggae. I didn't like that they were playing Sizzler Kalonji. I don't like that they were, guess what? What do they do? Urban. He was too urban for me, right? That's not race. That's another factor, right? Or that they were too ghetto. There's white people in the ghetto. In other words, we're making, giving, by eliminating or avoiding the requirement of a motivating factor, by using a but-for causation, we're setting the standard up so high that this is what you have to do. Who remembers Trading Places, the movie? Trading Places, the movie. If you haven't seen it, it's a classic. It's a Christmas movie. We're coming up on Christmas. My favorite Christmas movie is Trading Places. And remember when Eddie Murphy, Billy Ray Valentine, is doing a great job for the Dukes. He's at the Christmas party. He goes into the bathroom stall and he's smoking a joint, and he's hiding from the Dukes. They walk in and he hears them talking about the bet that switched him and Winthorpe. And they say what? They said, well, let's bring Winthorpe back. And Randall says, I don't want Winthorpe back. Mortimer says, keep Billy Ray Valentine to run our company. And what does Mortimer say, or Randall say? Let a nigger run our family business? And the other one agrees, I wouldn't either. That's the level of proof that you have to get. You have to hide in a bathroom stall. And note that he didn't have it recorded. Billy Ray Valentine or Eddie Murphy did not have that recorded. So it's still going to be, if you get into court, your word versus theirs, that they actually said that. Byron Allen is arguing that he has a Comcast official who says, we don't need another Bob Johnson, right? And so he wants to take that and get to discovery to show what else they've been talking about. Discovery in a lawsuit allows you to get all the emails, get all the paperwork in the institution you're suing that relate to that decision to show that they did in fact discriminate against you. So the first hurdle Byron Allen is trying to leap right here is the fact that they dismissed his case, even though he had that testimony. So even if you have you heard the Duke and Dukes saying that they don't want a nigger running their company, that's your word against them. You got to get it in an email. You got to get it in paper, right, to keep the case going, right? So as hard as that information is to get, right? Again, they're trying to, a but-for standard requires that type of smoking gun. And who is dumb enough, especially when you're dealing with multi-million, multi-billion, we're coming up on trillion-dollar companies that have lawyers all over the place. They know how to avoid saying stupid stuff like that, or at least most of them do. Right? So again, we're talking about this idea of proof. And this is why, again, we have associational standing here, right? Because all of the black media has to face this same hurdle. You would have to face this same hurdle. Again, if you were trying to buy a home or rent an apartment or lease some office space, and you knew you had the money, you knew you had a great idea, you were a perfect candidate for all this, but you were denied it. They're basically saying that you got to hide in a bathroom, you got to wiretap somebody's phone or something like that, and get them specifically saying, we do not want black people in our business. We don't want, right? Instead of them saying some type of pretext, such as, well, I don't know if they fit our culture, right? That's harder to say is a but-for factor. It's harder to say that that's race as a factor. Again, we have other books, right? There's other books talking about this type of issue. Diversity Incorporated is a new book that just came out that talks about how we have all these diversity officials within these corporations, and yet we don't have more black contractors. We don't have more black executives outside of the diversity office within major corporations. An old classic book that you can get online or here at the Bookstore is E. Franklin Fraser's Black Bourgeoisie. Right? They're basically talking about poverty pimping. Right? We're talking about having laws on the books. We're talking about diversity offices, small business administrations, set-asides, affirmative action programs that don't actually get support the people that they're supposed to support, that they're used to create a veneer, or as Paul Mooney calls, the illusion of inclusion. But when you actually need to sue under these laws or actually get a grant or a placement under these programs, they're reserved for others. That it's more likely that white women or some other business is going to survive or win the day. Again, we don't have time. I wish we could talk more about black billionaires and black businessmen, and business people and enterprises, and this idea of capital accumulation versus collectivism and socialism, what have you. We will talk a little bit more about this next week, because what we're going to do is, since I've compared Byron Allen to Colin Kaepernick, we're going to bring JayZ and his role as a black billionaire, and whether his role with the NFL is to lift as we climb, to bring other people with him, or is he part of the illusion of inclusion? Is he someone who is distracting us from the goal and creating unrealistic expectations and maintaining the status quo? Again, we're here at Hakim's Bookstore, 210 South 52nd Street, between Walnut and Locust. We're going to do this every Monday, 11 a.m. for our people. Go to Hakim's Bookstore on Facebook, Hakim's Bookstore on Instagram. Please email me your thoughts. Email us your feedback. Send it on, especially on, most easily probably on Facebook, right? So I can address your comments, your concerns. We can know what you want to talk about this week, next week, and the weeks after that, because we want to keep this going, right? Ashe, Nefertiti Moore, thank you for joining us. Thank you, John Morris. I hope I pronounced your name right. I want to honor everybody in the diaspora. We're going to talk much more about For Our People. We're going to bring scholarship. We're going to bring academics. We're going to bring intelligence. We're going to bring books to you. So until then, again, better educate ourselves and our people. Let's start and support Black enterprises and institutions. Let's stop unduly criticizing each other. Let's accumulate human, social, financial, political capital. Hotep.